We're going to move on to 2257 virtual currency. Everybody bought Bitcoin a year ago, so you're all very happy. Here we go. Iris Ikeda from DCCA.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Takumi and members of the committee. So my name is Iris Ikeda. I am the Commissioner of Financial Institutions, testifying with comments on Part 1 and supporting Part 2. Although there are two Part 2s, the Part 2 that starts later on in the bill. So this bill is actually a compilation of two pathways to manage the virtual currency industry. The first part is the proposed model law from the Uniform Law Commission, which has been studying this particular industry for a couple of years. DFI has been reviewing the various versions of the ULC model law, and we have determined that we are not in support of that for a couple reasons. There are 3 tiers of licensure. One is permitted unlicensed activity. The second one is registration for a certain level of activity. And third is a licensure for another level of activity. But for each of those activities, we have no idea which category these companies would fall into. Second thing is that with the many exemptions exempting folks from being licensed, we're not really sure what activities are actually covered. The third thing is reciprocity, although that might seem like a good idea. The different states, the various states that are actually supervising virtual currency, define virtual currency in different ways. Their licensing standards are different. So, and then the last thing is that it creates a new regulatory program without any staffing for us. As you know, we are self-funded, and I'm happy to say that almost all of my positions are filled, and I don't have an extra body or two to actually manage a new program or create a new program. Part 2 of the bill extends the current Money Transmitters Act to allow DFI to oversee virtual currency companies. And so for that, we already have a program. I have staff that is already providing oversight to this particular program. What we're doing, what we like about this particular part of the bill is that we are trying to address what we've heard from other virtual currency companies who had applied to DFI for an application or for a license. What they have told us that they cannot meet is the permissible investments part of the current statute. And so for that, we suggest that we accept like-kind virtual currency. So if they are trading in or exchanging in Bitcoin, they need to hold the same amount of Bitcoin in their reserves. If they are trading in Ethereum, that's what they need to hold. They cannot trade in Bitcoin and hold Ethereum or some other coin. Like kind for like kind. We know that the valuation of the virtual currency fluctuates throughout the day. So we are asking for, we're not asking for the value of that particular virtual currency to be matched, just that type of currency. Mm-hmm. So that was a change that the previous committee made, and we would like it to change back to the original version, which was not same value, but same volume. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Katalani. Next up, Peter Hamasaki from the Commission to Promote Uniform Legislation.
Good afternoon, Chair Takumi, Vice Chair Chiyama, members of the committee. Peter Hamasaki and Ken Takayama from the State of Hawaii Commission to Promote Uniform Legislation. We're in support of Part 1 of the bill, which, as mentioned, enacts the Uniform Law Commission's draft of the Regulation of Virtual Currency Business Act. In the IAC committee, the recommendation when it came over, and it included the Uniform Law Act, was to really look at the consumer protection aspects of, excuse me, of the two bills. And, we think that the, Uniform Law Commission draft in Part 1 provides, extensive consumer protections that we think, we hope that this committee will consider in reviewing the two alternatives. For example, in Part 52, in Part 51, there are extensive disclosure requirements that go well beyond what's in Part 2 in terms of what needs to be done, in terms of informing consumers as to the nature of the transaction that we think are very strong consumer protections. In Section 52, there are rules that regarding ownership of the virtual currency, which would help in the event of any kind of default or bankruptcy of the person engaged in the business. So that makes clear as to who actually owns the currency that's being held. And in Section 62, there's an substantial requirements in terms of security, anti-money laundering, and other provisions that are intended to protect consumers. So for those reasons, we think that from a consumer protection perspective, Part 1 is much more robust in terms of its protection. There's some mention of an unregulated portion. The intent of the Uniform Law Commission model was to provide, given the new and dynamic nature of this technology, to create a low threshold of $5,000 to which persons engaging in the business whose activity is less than that amount on an annual basis with residents would not be required to register. And again, the intent there is if you're engaging in relatively small amounts of business, and $5,000 is probably half a Bitcoin. They didn't want to stifle that type of innovation by requiring a full-on registration requirement. So that's the reason for that requirement. If there's any questions, I'm sorry. Do you have anything to add, Ken?
Can I add anything? No? Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Pierre Sirik from the Sirik Law Firm. In opposition, Theo Chino, the founder of Chino Limited. The organization is abolishthebitlicense.org. Well, take a wild guess. They oppose. Christy Logan as an individual in support. That's all the written testimony we have. Anyone wish to testify? Oh, Vice Chair is very good about this. Oh, we have Gary Namba in opposition. Anyone else, sir?
Thank you, Chair Takumi, Vice Chair, and members. I am J.P. Schmidt. I was formerly the Insurance Commissioner from 2003 to 2010. I am currently an advisor for the Ethereum Foundation, but I'm here testifying as an individual, not on behalf of the Ethereum Foundation. And I did submit testimony. I think it was a couple minutes late, so it may be stuck in the computer somewhere.
Okay.
As you say, Chair Takumi, if we had invested in Bitcoin a year ago, we'd be very happy because it's risen 600% over the past year. If we had invested in Ethers, we'd be very, very happy because it's increased in value over 6,000% over the past year. The bill that's before you, I'm in support of either or the first or second part of the bill. I think it's critically important that Hawaii pass a bill that will allow Hawaii citizens to trade or exchange virtual currencies because we're the only state that doesn't allow it. Citizens in 49 other states can do it. But I am actually not, think it's not nearly as important as simply an investment vehicle in spite of the tremendous increases. What I think is particularly important is it's the first step in engaging with the new technology that underlies Bitcoin and Ethereum, and this is known as blockchain technology or distributed ledger technology. And it's essential that we pass this in order to deal with it. As chair of the SEC testified before Congress a few days ago, you cannot have DLT or distributed ledger technology without the tokens. So you have to have that in order to engage with the technology. Now, the technology itself, a number of very well-respected sources, including the World Economic Forum, McKinsey, Deloitte, have said that the blockchain or distributed ledger technology is going to be as transformative on society as the internet was. It has a tremendous number of benefits to it. It's still a young technology, and it has more development to do, but most people believe that those problems will be resolved, and it will be extensively used in all businesses. Some of the largest businesses in the world, J.P. Morgan, Santander, financial institutions, insurance companies, Zurich and Swiss Re and others, as well as trucking companies, as well as health and hospital companies, are entering consortiums working together to develop applications of this technology, and it's believed that it will transform that technology. As one example, I think it was Deloitte, in examining use of blockchain for insurance companies, stated that the use of that will reduce their cost by 35%. And as insurance commissioner, and as we all know, insurance costs too much, and a 35% decrease in cost would certainly help to control the cost of premiums in health insurance as well as all the other insurance. So it's very, so it's very important that we engage in this technology because it's coming. Also to really promote it because of the economic development and business benefits entailed in it. I happened to run into Insurance Commissioner Gordon Ito on my way in here, and he told me that he had a InsurTech sandbox bill that has been submitted, and that I recommended at a hearing on a Senate bill. Because that really helps the regulators to work with those developing this technology to better understand it and see what kind of regulation works best. Harvard Business Review said that for digital business, there has to be digital regulation. There has to be a different kind of regulation. And the sandbox technique helps educate everyone on how better to use it. The Finance Authority in Great Britain introduced one a little over a year ago and has had several cohorts go through and issued a report in October on it, on lessons learned. Arizona is looking at doing it as well. And other states are already applying blockchain to some of their processes, like Illinois is putting all birth certificates on the blockchain, which establishes an ID. And one of the things benefits that has is it really does away with fraud. You can't have fraud anymore. They're putting all their real estate filings on the blockchain. So it's a new technology that's growing very fast, and it's something that we need to understand and be aware of and engage and work with here in the state of Hawaii for the benefit of all of our citizens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt. That's all the written, and oral testimony you have. We'll find that written testimony. That's anyone else? If not, please step forward.
Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Ian Luthringer. I'm with Anatha Technologies, a blockchain technology and consulting company that operates out of Hawaii. We are a member of the International Blockchain Regulatory Alliance, which is an organization spread throughout the world dedicated to promoting effective regulation of the blockchain industry. We believe that the drafters of the Uniform Act have taken the right steps towards regulating the industry. We just believe it's not quite there yet. And to jump on adopting this particular act would jeopardize the growth of the industry within Hawaii and basically leave Hawaii out of the running to be part of the future of blockchain development. As the DCCA stated, they would not be able to enforce it for various reasons, including not understanding fully what activities are actually being regulated. This falls back on the fact that the definition sections are written so broad that they would even include any digital work of art. So if a teenager recorded a song that they performed on their computer, they're now storing virtual currency because that song could be traded for value. It could be a store of value. There are carve-outs. There is a tier system to provide for exceptions, but when you break down further definitions, you see that this doesn't actually fully apply to rectify these issues. So basically, it's overbroad and overreaches its authority. There's also issues with implications with violating the Commerce Clause and the Contract Clause of the U.S. Constitution. At the end of the day, the Act will not stand up if challenged, and we want to prevent that. We want an Act that's in place that everybody knows this Act is standing on solid ground. This is what we need to do to be in compliance. This is what we need to do to make sure that this industry grows appropriately and protects the people involved, both the businesses and the consumers. So at this point, we would just request that, as the Senate did, defer ruling on Part 1, allow more time for discovery of what is blockchain technology, what are the different aspects. To broadly define virtual currency as it is in the Act misses out on the fact that there's at least 30 different applications of blockchain technology and quote-unquote virtual currency, which are all being grouped into one category, which would be Bitcoin. And that just misses the boat on what this is all really about. So deferring on that, and as to Part 2, we're looking at a situation where they're incorporating the same definitions, taking the language from the Model Act and using that to amend the money transmitter statute. Again, this is a great idea. We need to make sure that we're regulating transactions between cash, which is legal tender, which is within the purview of Hawaii to regulate transactions of cash for Bitcoin. But it also, again, it reaches farther than it should because of the definition framework. So we think that there should be the amendment. It should take place as soon as possible, but there needs to be a little bit more of a discovery period and revisions to the acts to properly define what is being covered and what isn't. We are in the process of working with the Senate, and we've reached out to the DCCA to provide a symposium on what is blockchain technology, what are we actually dealing with here, because most people don't understand. Again, the drafters of the Act, when you really read it, you would have to say they probably don't truly understand the technology behind it. But that's not their fault. Most people don't. There's a very tiny percentage of the world that actually understands what this is right now. Fortunately for Hawaii, you have in our CEO one of the brightest minds in the industry. He's been in it since the beginning. He's taken part in over 60 ICOs. He's turned $100,000 into $200 million. He's had a 7,500% return over the past year alone. And that's not counting Bitcoin growth or anything like that. He is very well adept to educate the legislature, the DCCA, on what this technology actually is. And that's what we're reaching out. We've already, like I said, been in touch with several senators. The DCCA very briefly discussed it. And we're going to offer that free of charge, no consulting, just to educate with no point in trying to push any direction, just this is what this technology is. Now you can make an informed decision. We think that is important, and that's how we truly protect the public. We need to make educated and informed decisions, and then we need to restructure these acts to integrate that knowledge. And that's all I have to offer at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? If not, members, any questions? If not, we're going to move along to